I'm sure by now everyone has heard of the coming New World Order, to include a one world government, one world religion, one world currency and economy that will be under the control of the elite globalists. This initiative has slowly been creeping its way into fruition for years, and before we know it, all of our rights under the Constitution will be a distant memory if the elite have their way. Their ultimate goal is to have total control over every aspect of our lives. This includes control over our food and water sources, our children's education, health care, who and how we worship in our faith, our finances, news media, entertainment, and even how we think. The truth is, the elite already have control over these areas in our lives. But in some countries, we still have liberties that we're clinging to, specifically in the United States and our right to bear arms. In order to have complete control over us, the elite know that they'll have to disarm us. But they realize that most Americans will not willingly hand over our weapons, especially given the recent militarization of our police force. So how will they ever achieve this? They'll have to trick society into thinking outlawing guns is what we need to stay safe, when nothing could be further from the truth. Many other nations have done this throughout history, resulting in a devastating number of deaths committed by the very government they thought would protect them. This video will cover the various methods being used to condition us into thinking guns are bad and should be outlawed, and even have us happily turn them over to the very people that desire to enslave us.
I had planned another closing message, but I feel compelled to say what I'm about to say. Now, I risk sounding like a conspiracy theorist, but it's no longer a theory. What I'm about to say is fact. The secret organizations of the world power elite are no longer secret. They have planned and are now leading us into a one-world communist government.
Control issue. What they do is they manipulate an emotional crisis, a national emotional crisis, to further an ideological agenda which involves the evaporation, the slow disintegration of your civil rights, your liberties, your ability to live and let live. And it's a disturbing pattern that, frankly, is really starting to get under my skin.
In a situation like this, I remember at Virginia Tech when I went out there, parents, loved ones of slain young people wanted to remember their sons and their daughters, and as a result they spoke and made a statement. So we'll see if Robbie Parker, I assume he's going to come out to the microphones now and make a statement. Looks like the family is there and they're getting ready to come to the microphone, so we'll listen in.
Okay. So my name's Robbie Parker.
really.
This is 8-year-old Alexis Wasik and her mother.
You were in there, Alexis?
Yes.
What happened?
Nothing really much. We heard like an ambulance and a police officer come, and everybody was a little scared, crying, and I felt actually a little sick, and it felt like I was gonna throw up, and it felt that to my teacher.
Were kids crying and screaming?
Yeah, kids were crying, not really like screaming, but they're all huddling together, and they felt so sick.
Her mom says when she arrived at the firehouse, Alexis was already with her father.
And he had her in his arms and, and crying. And so she just goes, Mama, I'm okay, I'm here.
We heard them on the roof and in our building. The police officer come. There was like police officers like down on the roof, and there was also in the hallway. There's most of the lights off, and my teacher, Mrs. Sullivan, she had to close the blind.
Joining us now is Robert Licata. His son, Aiden, is a first grader who was saved by his teacher and ran to safety. His daughter was also unharmed. Also joining us, Joe and Lynn Wasik, as well as their daughter, Alexis, who is in the 3rd grade at Sandy Hook. 2 days later, Robert, how's your family doing?
We're taking it day by day, minute by minute. It's what both our son and our daughter saw is incomprehensible. We're trying to make sense of a senseless act. We speak to him. We make sure we understand what he's feeling. We try to explain things that can't be explained, and we take stock in our faith and in our community, our neighbors, and our friends who have been just tremendous.
Lynn and Joe and little Alexis, I see there in front of you. Does Alexis want to talk about it? And if so, what are you telling her?
As far as talking, we haven't. We're breaking into her slowly. We're not trying to pry.
Executive order signed by President Obama has sparked controversy on both sides of the political aisle. The National Defense Resources Preparedness Executive Order was signed quietly Friday night and gives the president the power to control U.S. resources.
The Rules Committee is going to meet in the House. They are going to come up with a rule that makes it okay for them to do a same-day bill. So they'll pass this rule. It's, believe it or not, called martial law.
This would give the President of the United States the authority to declare basically martial law during times of peace. There are new disturbing developments out of Washington tonight regarding the President's belief that he has the legal authority to assassinate U.S. citizens. Incredibly enough, it appears that our Commander-in-Chief actually believes that authority exists not only on foreign soil, but right here on American soil as well.
But Senators McCain and Levin have added this legislation which would authorize the President to declare the entire United States of America, all 50 states and all territories, to be a battlefield, even though there's no battle, thanks be to God, going on here.
War on terror is different.
And that would authorize him to use Commander-in-Chief authority in the United States, to use the military to arrest people in the United States who, in the President's opinion, are enemies of the country.
Particularly to hear President Obama claim the power to keep people in prison indefinitely with no charges against them, no conviction, no sentence, just imprisonment.
David, why does the DHS need 450 million hollow point bullets?
That kind of ammo that they purchased from ATK, hollow point ammunition, as you had explained, it's designed to, tear through human flesh and then expand. It's designed to kill people. This is not the optimal kind of ammo you would buy for target practice. It's more expensive and it's more precise.
Do you think this is a sign that they're preparing for some sort of mass civil unrest?
So they have an open bid right now, DHS, for even more ammunition, for 175 million rounds of .223 caliber rifle ammo. It's almost identical to the ammunition used by NATO peacekeeping forces.
But its police department now has its own mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicles, or AMRAPs. So do police departments in many other towns and counties across the U.S., all thanks to the Pentagon's so-called 1033 program, which provides or transfers surplus Department of Defense military equipment to state and local civilian law enforcement agencies without charge.
Not alone. A spreadsheet obtained by News Channel 5 Investigates shows thousands of pieces of military equipment going to Tennessee police departments. Items like mine-resistant vehicles, night vision goggles, helicopters, and guns. It's cold! Equipment used to fight in Iraq and Afghanistan is now going to local departments.
The disbursement across the country is so, uneven and random and, just sort of based on who's good at manipulating the system.
30 Tennessee departments just received mine-resistant vehicles designed to protect soldiers from roadside bombs in Iraq and Afghanistan.
What we've done is we've encouraged the police to become more like the military.
In my own neighborhood, I can't believe it.
Valco says the militarization of police departments comes at a price, like more SWAT raids.
When you surround yourself with the equipment of war, with the language of war, with the tactic of war, you're going to be much less likely to look for ways of resolving disputes using the least amount of force possible.
During the late 70s, Congress passed legislation called Posse Comitatus, barring the military from operating on American soil. And in the early 80s, there was an effort to circumvent that in Congress by arming police with military-grade weaponry. And now we're seeing that play play out in the streets. People in the inner city in the U.S. have been experiencing this. So civilians in the U.S. are now up against basically military-style policing.
Why is this thought to be a good idea to actually bring these high-caliber weapons into U.S. streets?
I don't think it's a good idea. High-caliber weapons are extremely dangerous. They have a very high ricocheting velocity, and that means that innocent people are going to get killed and injured. They will be shot. They can go through doors. They can go through cinder block. They can go through metal car doors. And this type of velocity is not necessary. I spent 24 years in the Philadelphia Police Department. We upgraded our Smith & Wessons to Glocks, which are a very powerful pistol, and they worked very well. And there's no reason to have anything stronger than that. I spent a year in New York City supporting the Occupy movement. I was arrested down there for civil disobedience, and never did I see any type of behavior by those protesters that would ever need any type of weapon, let alone high caliber. If anything, it was the protesters that would have needed high caliber weapons. You do it. You acquire all this military weapon, the semi-tanks, the MRAPs, the spy drones, and whatnot. And I guarantee you, once you purchase them, they're not going to sit in a warehouse. That police commissioner is going to use them.
Captain, one might ask, will this equipment not obscure the lines between soldier and police officers, especially in those small communities where they're already being distributed? What's your take on that?
Yes, it will obviously obscure the line between military and the police.
The Army manual outlines the plan to kill rioters and demonstrators in America. That's right, they have plans to confiscate our firearms and kill American citizens on U.S. soil. This during a mass civil unrest, I guess, shooting innocent civilians perhaps. And it goes on to describe how prisoners will be processed through internment camps. Wow. So there you have it. Our own military being trained for armed conflict with U.S. citizens. They're being trained to confiscate our guns in preparations to process us into camps during civil unrest.
Say this. It's video that's painful to watch, showing a 23-year-old muscled-up Victoria cop throwing a 76-year-old man onto the hood of a police car, then tackling him to the ground, and then shooting him with a taser gun twice. This is the officer in question, Nathaniel Robinson of the Victoria Police Department. He is now under investigation for using excessive force.
Increasingly, the police are trained to view the people in the communities that they're supposed to be protecting and serving as enemies.
It's not just their possession of all this equipment that's an issue. Watchdog groups say many of these police departments lack the training in how to use these weapons responsibly, and that often escalates the dangers.
Dangers like police overreacting when conducting minor operations like serving search warrants.
They will drive up in an armored personnel carrier, raid a person's home, holding assault rifles, holding people at gunpoint, yelling at everyone to get on the floor. This is an extremely traumatic experience, and we've seen over and over again situations like this where people are traumatized and sometimes people are injured and killed.
Earlier this year, police searching for a drug dealer near Atlanta threw a flash grenade into a home that landed in a toddler's crib. The boy, known locally as Baby Boo Boo, had half his face and chest blown off and spent weeks in a hospital in a medically induced coma.
These cops are out of control. They are ruining good people's lives.
Those charges come from an innocent man who says he's been devastated emotionally, physically, and financially by cops he believes abuse their power. And while he had threatened no one, not even himself, SWAT kicked in his door, launched a stun grenade into the bathroom, and stormed in, according to Chadwick, without announcing their identity.
So while I had my hands up naked in the shower, they shot me with a 40-millimeter non-lethal round, pinned me against the wall, and proceeded to beat the crap out of me.
Well, no-knock raids have increased from 3,000 a year in the mid-1980s to nearly 80,000 raids in 2011. Just for the math, that's an increase of 3,000%.
Was washing dishes out of my peripheral vision. I see movement. I look up. There's a Rambo kind of guy with like a vest and a gun pointing at me.
That was Florida nurse Louise Goldsberry describing what it was like when her home was raided by what she thought were home invaders.
I dropped to the floor and I yelled to my boyfriend, "Get down, there's somebody with a gun out there."
The police knocked down her door, handcuffed Goldsberry and her boyfriend, and then the police searched the home without a warrant. They were searching for a suspect they believed might be somewhere in the complex. No suspect was found. In a Charlottesville, Virginia parking lot, alcohol beverage control agents surrounded the 20-year-old college students and her roommates in their car. That's after the girls left a store with what the officers believed to be a case of beer. Being terrified by the plainclothed officers with weapons, the girls fled the scene and made this frantic 911 call.
Oh my God!
What's going on?
You don't know if they're real police officers or not, and we're freaking out.
In the end, the suspected case of beer was a case of sparkling water. The mayor of Berwyn Heights, Maryland, Shai Calvo, experienced a no-knock raid in his own home.
I saw 3 or 4 men in black and masks holding high-caliber rifles walking across my yard. I didn't have time to process that before I heard an explosion. Explosion of my door being blown open, followed by immediate gunfire.
Upon entry, the SWAT team shot and killed Calvo's 2 dogs.
They bound my hands, they pulled me across the living room, had me kneel on the floor in front of my front door, which had been blown open. I thought it was a home invasion. I was fearful that I was about to be executed.
Later, it was discovered the invasion was due to a drug raid mix-up.
They've militarized the police, and the police, as some Army officers have told me, is that once you put that gear on, and you've got some of them wearing masks now, by the way, which is pretty far out. That's what they do in Afghanistan. You can't see who you're up against. They become the military. It's not like the old peace officer who would walk up and say, "Sir, here's a warrant. I'd like to talk to you."
This isn't Officer O'Toole with his club coming down and saying hi to the kids.
It's more cool. They've got tasers, assault rifles. They shoot the dogs first. I mean, I've seen some of the raids. It's awful. Ayanna Jones, a young girl, 7 years old in Detroit, about 2 years ago, she was asleep on her couch. In storms these guys in the middle of the night. One of the officers' guns go off and shoot her and kill her princess blanket over top of her. Her dad runs out and goes, "What's happened?" They slam him face down in her blood. The guy they were looking for was 2 floors up.
Wrong house.
Wrong house. Going on the case of Jose Guerrero down in Arizona, ex-Marine. Bang, 3 a.m. in the morning, door goes down, his wife starts screaming, he takes his wife and child and puts them in the closet. He stands at the end of his hallway with his hunting rifle. The police enter a scene, 90 rounds were fired, 60 hit him. He falls down. They wouldn't let the medics take care of him. He bled to death on his own floor. The police claimed he shot at them. Investigation showed his safety never came off his weapon.
My gosh.
So those are the kind of cases we're seeing. They're shocking. And as a civil libertarian, I've been in this area 40 years. This is a trend. If we don't reverse, folks, I'm creeped out, I say, and I'm worried.
Men in Kevlar vests and helmets, camouflage, carrying automatic rifles, moving in tactical armored vehicles. These aren't American troops on the battlefield, but police in Ferguson. One observer says he thought he saw police in an MRAP.
An MRAP is a mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicle. It's built to withstand armor-piercing bombs. This is not something that we need in American communities.
More than 500 MRAPs have made their way from Afghanistan and Iraq to local police forces in America just over the past couple of years. It's part of what the ACLU, in a recent report, called the excessive militarization of American policing. Indications of that are everywhere in Ferguson. Police in these towns are getting much of this combat equipment free of charge from the Pentagon. The Defense Department says just in 2013, nearly $450 million worth of military equipment was given to law enforcement. Critics say often when they get these weapons, policemen's attitudes change.
This pile includes more than 500 pages of internal affairs complaints lodged against Officer Michael Hobbs. We found dozens of use of force reports brushed aside by internal affairs, including claims Hobbs is terrorizing citizens. Now we're asking the tough question, is your safety at risk?
My face was all beat up. My ribs were either broke or cracked. I had black and blue marks on my back of my legs that you could tell were just from a baton. There was I think seven stitches above my one eye.
These are the gruesome pictures of Brian Houlihan, bloodied and beaten at the hands of an officer who was supposed to protect him.
He was out of control.
Houlihan passed out in his car in a diabetic coma, this sticker warning of his life-threatening medical condition.
They should have known.
But the police report shows this man, Officer Michael Hobbs, arrived at the scene and wrongfully assumed Houlihan was drunk. Hobbs forced himself into the car and struck Houlihan twice with a closed fist to the face and a blunt elbow blow to his head.
The next thing I remember was waking up in the ambulance.
This was just one of 12 disturbing complaints filed against Hobbs in the last 5 years.
He's basically being a thug and a terrorist.
Vic Morton is a security guard.
And I think he pretty much needs to be put off the force.
Morton responded to a call for help at the apartment complex he protects, but ended up handcuffed and arrested for obstruction because he says Hobbs is power hungry and wanted someone to arrest.
That was just plain police brutality.
Will you speak with us?
If you want to speak with me at work.
Can you step off your property and speak with us?
No, you can leave my property now.
Go
ahead and call 911.
Why is it that you won't speak with us about these cases of abuse of power? When we tried to speak with Hobbs, he called the police. Will you tell me why you beat Mr. Houlihan up?
Have a nice day.
What about the other 8 complaints against you?
Off the property, ma'am.
Police Chief Greg Porter defended his officer's actions. Have you taken any disciplinary action against Officer Hobbs?
No, ma'am.
Not a single suspension.
Has he ever been suspended for anything? No, sir. No, ma'am.
No discipline and not a single day suspension for an officer with 58 incidents of physical use of force in the last 5 years. That's nearly 20 times more than an average officer. Do you think an officer can be threatened by somebody who's in a diabetic coma and basically passed out?
I wasn't there. Again, there was a thorough investigation. The investigation revealed that his actions were within departmental policy and procedure.
They just think they're above the law.
From beatings to knee strikes and chokeholds, the chief defends what others characterize as terrorizing and an abuse of force.
In the 20th century, government murdered 4 times as many people as were killed in all the international and domestic wars combined.
USSR, 61,911,000 people killed.
Hitler's Germany, nearly 21 million people killed.
Japan's imperialism, nearly 6 million people killed.
Western colonization killed over 50 million people.
Pol Pot's Cambodia, funded by the U.S. government. 2 million people killed.
China's Communist Party, as many as 76 million people killed between 1949 and 1987.
And the list goes on and on.
Demand to know why the Department of Homeland Security bought more than 1.6 billion hollow point bullets.
How many more people does government have to kill?
Enough. Enough.
Demand an end to citizen disarmament.
As an American. As an American citizen.
as a patriot.
For your children.
Enough of the people laying down and letting government kill them en masse after disarming them, as they've done throughout history over and over again.
Now is the time.
It's time.
It's time to realize that when the government takes your guns, people die.
It's time to realize the biggest threat to you and your family is government.
It's time to recognize government is the greatest killer of all time.
Demand they show you the word hunting in the Second Amendment.
Demand our politicians uphold the Constitution and Bill of Rights as they swore to when they took office.
It's time for our leaders.
Freedom of religion. It's the Christians who are under siege by government officials and anti-religion groups who think Christmas and Christianity have no business in the public arena.
The Department of Defense has just issued a new list of extremists that should be watched. And on that, in fact, number one, past the Muslim Brotherhood and past Hamas, Hezbollah, number one, evangelical Christians.